Good afternoon. Hopefully I won't be putting you to sleep after your lunch, and we'll give that a good try. I'm Bill Willis. I'm the Field Chief Technology Officer at IDMWORKS, and today we're simply going to talk about what does it take to make your identity stuff work, not just today, but tomorrow and in the future. We always have the problem of not looking forward in the windshield. We're always trying to solve yesterday's problems. And so I'm going to give you some guidance, some tools, some techniques, some tips, whatever you want to call that, on how to do this. This is something that I've been doing for a really long time before I had gray hair, and I expect to do it by the time it falls out. So we're all good that way. Okay, so this is the outline of what we're going to talk about. What does your roadmap look like today? Do you have one? If you do, what does it look like? Is it serviceable? Do I need to change the road I'm on? Do I need to take my car and tune it up? Do I need a new car? You know, what is it that I have and what is it that I don't have, and how can I make this repeatable? Strategic, repeatable are going to be the themes today. Typically when people think about strategy, they do it one time and never reintroduce that to themselves. We're going to talk about the bumps in the road and the back to basics, kind of the 40 things that are going to be bumpy as you go through this journey in identity. And that's only 40 of 100 different things, but we're going to talk at least a little bit about that. And then I'm going to bring you all the way back. We're going to pull down the covers and say, what's back to basics? What are the 4 things that you have to do regardless of what kind of identity you're trying to service in order to make it work correctly and repeatably and be able to take advantage of new and interesting technology going forward. Threw this one in here. Cyber insurance, does it really pay out? How do I make sure that if I really do get hacked that it will pay out, right? So we're going to talk a little bit about the evidence required to do that. And then where I've got 3 question marks, it starts with an F and ends with a K. And, you know, looking at what is here from yesterday, today, and tomorrow, how do I actually take advantage of all this stuff instead of being in buzzword hell, right? How do I take advantage? How can I make it work? Now we're going to, after that, we'll talk a little bit about the tactics, the things that are just like a toothache, the 6, 7, or N number of things that I always have to deal with, and I just can't get away from them. So we'll talk a little bit about aligning that and trying to get away from them so you can push that into the operational model and get away from the tactics itself. All right. We're going to talk a little bit about what changing the way you look at identity and looking at it from the inside out instead of from the outside in. That'll be all about firewalls, VPN, and zero trust. Then we're going to talk about the call to action. All right, what is it? Where can I start, Bill? How do I get it going? I have no idea. All I know is I got a big bucket of crap and I got to go fix it. All right, so we're going to talk about how do I get started. We're going to talk a little bit about what good looks like. That's Nick right here. He's going to talk about his stuff and what he's been doing with the Ping cloud environment. And then I've got questions here. But again, if you have any questions, please just raise your hand and we'll go through that. All right. At least half of my customers, that's the roadmap. No key, no car, a piece of white paper. I don't know where to start. Right? So what I'm trying to do here is when we go through this in this 40 minutes or so, I'm going to use these 7 different bullets on the road to show you an example of what an identity roadmap would look like and how to get there. All right. So here's bumps in the road. There's at least 40 things on this slide, of which I'm not going to roster them all. But you own at least 2/3 to 3/4, in some case, 120% of these things, right? They all go through what kind of intelligence do I get from my logging in order to make identity level decisions and access decisions? How do I get away from a team of people that has to administer my stuff and try and push that to the edge and let people do it for themselves? How do I really make sure that authentication is working well? And my authorization points. How am I going to make all of that work? And every single item here is part of what you've been asked to do on a regular basis. Every single one of those things is discrete, distinct, required, not optional, And it doesn't matter if I'm doing a workforce identity management, if I'm doing a customer identity management, if I'm doing contractors, vendors, or IoT. Because every device in IoT has an identity, and they authenticate with their digital certificate. So this is the backdrop of what we're going to talk about when we go through this. So back to basics. These are the 4 things that you must do. And I'll repeat that. These are the 4 things that you must do. If you've ever had the chance to make or build a house, these are the 4 pillars on the edge of the basement that you're going to pour. If any one of these pillars is broken, your identity program is broken. At least 90% of the people that I talk to have this issue right here. They had a slice-in-time view of their data model 2 years ago. They bought a company, they sold a company, they went from on-prem into hybrid, they've got Salesforce now, they've got ADP now, and it's like, yeah, it's different now, right? We've got one specific folks that buy 5 or 6 companies a year. That data model changes every single time they buy a company. And guess what? They never go back and say, okay, how do I fix that? Where did I put any kind of connective tissue into the source of truth in that data model? Because they're all connected. If this is broken, the source of truth is broken. I can't get there from here. I cannot make sure that everybody has the correct user ID, has the correct GUID, has the correct email address. And guess what? Then my connective tissue is broken because now I have orphans all over the place. And how am I going to authenticate that? I've got one customer that has a service account that keeps logging in and deleting things. And they're like, what the? And it's like, are you letting it so it's being logged in? It can be logged in to RDP? It's like, huh? You know, there's some basic tips and tools there because it's broken. And then finally, what does the business ask you to do with your use cases? How do I enable that to work correctly? And I have to make it flexible enough in all 4 of these components to be able to do it next year, the year after, and the year after. Remember one very specific thing. Identity management is a generational investment for the business. You pick the products that you pick in a slice in time, but then you own them for years and years and years. I've had the privilege of building a product that IBM still sells in identity management long, long ago, and guess what? That thing is so sticky, people want to get rid of it and they can't. And it's over 20 years old. My son is I'm happy that my son is still sticky, but you know what? It's still 20 years old. It needs to go somewhere else. He's graduated, he can drink a beer now, he needs to go. So here we are. All right, does this all make sense to you? I want to make sure that these basic points make sense. And this one slide you can give to your business leadership. They will understand what this piece specifically is. Okay. All right, so I'm just going to throw this in and pivot a little bit. Every cyber insurance policy that I've seen over the last N number of years requires multi-factor authentication and privileged access management. 100%, all of them. Not just some of them, not a couple of them, all of them. That means that you have to show the evidence that every time somebody authenticates to authorize and do something that is a non-elevated account, they're using multi-factor authentication. When an administrator is logging in to do something, they have to show the evidence from whatever PAM you have that that actually happened and the password was obfuscated, and they also use multi-factor authentication on top of the other multi-factor authentication. If you do not have that, if you don't have that and show the evidence, this is a very evidence-based audit. So if you get hacked and you can't show any of this, guess what? They won't pay out. You just threw your money in the trash. And somebody hacked you and you got to give them more money. So this is just a common sense piece of wisdom that is like, you're going to be asked to re-up your cyber insurance at some point. You have to make sure these 2 building blocks are in place for that. All right, here we go. There are 14 bullets up here. I could have put about 140 up here. And these are just some of the ones that I've chosen. And the idea here is that some of them are germane to yesterday and current state. Some of them are going to be for right now. And there's going to be future state. Everybody talks about getting to passwordless, right? So what does that really mean? That means that this stuff right here has to be really, really good. Because if you're going to use a Hyper or a Beyond or any of these other ones, they put the digital certificate on the client device. And that now becomes the password. If you don't have good cryptography in place and you don't have good certificate management in place, all of that breaks 100% of the way. Okay. This is my favorite one right here. That one right there. So my internal engineering team, they're just cranking away. They've got their pipeline going. They're going crazy, right? They picked up some open source that the Russians put out there. Didn't check to see if it was any good with the DAS0 SAST. Hey, it works, right? Oh, let's just pick a service account. We'll just put it in there, use ID password, boom. Build, test, done. Guess what? We all know what that means. But they're doing it. They still do it. And they will continue to do it unless you get your arms around it. Especially if they're going to go to any kind of Kubernetes or anything like that, you can pull that account and do a just-in-time authentication. And that should be a requirement, not an option. Because, again, I just had a customer that had one of those embedded service accounts get hacked, and they don't have a log to figure out what's going on. So that's a real-world problem with actually a very easy fix. So if you go to your vice president of engineering that's in your company or whoever is doing your application development, whether it's in-sourced or outsourced, that's a low-hanging fruit. And if they won't do it, then just stick your auditor on them. Just say, can you turn the covers and look right here, please? It's right there. So, okay. This one's exciting from my perspective. Identity fencing, that means I can figure out, I can just walk around and authenticate and just be me and not have to worry necessarily about what everything else around me is. We all have the ability to be a workforce authentication, a customer authentication on everything that we do. If we're doing contracting, all of those things, right? That fence can be built. All the data is there and all the technology is now there, but you need to find it and make sure it works in your environment. And this is the last one. I love this one. Right? Our firewall is really going to go away for authentication. The answer is maybe. Depends on what you look like. If you have a cloud-only environment and you've got a remote workforce, there is no reason in the world that you should have a VPN going into one pipe and then spit it all the way back out and around. You should be able to architect around that and make it work right, and basically save 30% of your network environment. Right? Just pure bandwidth, because you shouldn't have to go into one place. So anyway, that is some of the stuff we're going to look at here. The next generation identity standards are going to be really important. I'm a big advocate of figuring out a way to empower my internal application teams to be able to do SCIM-like services with an internal open source library that they can just do a branch, load it up for both coarse and fine-grained attributes, and be able to build that thing. And now I can get every access that I have, not just the products that I buy. Okay? Does all that make sense to you folks? Not the last one? Our firewall's going away? Oh. Oh, yeah. So the standards bodies are working on some of that stuff. And so if you haven't looked at them, you need to do that. I've got a couple of my colleagues that are on those standards bodies. Then I could be happy to get them pointed to you for that. Okay. All right, cool. All right. Tell me who doesn't own those top 6, that you don't have at least 1 or 2 of those in your own house. Plus the ones that you own that I didn't put on there. Right? I got manual processes all over the place. I just can't get rid of them as hard as I try. As hard as I try. I've got internal homegrown applications. There's no way I can bring them into the fold. I just can't figure out how to do it, right? Whether it's politics, whether it's money, whether it's the team, it's just like, I got to figure out what that is, right? Fine-grained attributes across the enterprise. This is Valhalla right here. If you can get every fine-grained attribute on every application inside your house, you can then declare victory, because now you know exactly how many people have a credit limit of X dollars across the board that can actually do something or not do something, right? Who's approving this stuff anyway? I saw it come from an email, but is that delegated? Is that real? It's like, I got a contract I need to extend for another 30 days. What happened? Yeah, it's like, and that goes down to the source of truth, right? Remember the 4 pillars? That's one of the items that always gets parked somewhere in the wrong spot. Whether they use their ITSM, like a ServiceNow, and park it in there and put some forms in there, to just building their own internal thing, and it's gotten so unwieldy and so hard to undo that they can't get it undone, right? Every single customer that I see has that problem. And again, back to the cybersecurity insurance, I have a limited privileged access management tool. I've got the Microsoft tool, or I've got something else and it doesn't quite do it right. I got to figure out something here. Or I'm getting hacked and I got no way that I can actually turn the recording capability on to see where this thing is even coming from, right? So you've got to make sure you've got those. So ... I'm sure you've got at least one handful of some other things that you own that are a problem here. That is the roster. The output of this slide will be the input to the roadmap. But before we go there, we're going to talk about old school and new school. On the left is old school, the moat, right? I get into the VPN, I might have multi-factor authentication in there, and then I get into the environment, and guess what? I can go wherever I want. I don't care. You let me in, I'm going to roam around. I'm going to go lateral, I'm going to go horizontal, I'm going to go vertical, I'm just going to go wherever I want to go, right? That's not today. You can see that you've got every cloud in here. You've got at least one, probably, if not 2, or maybe all 3, depending on what you're doing and what you've outsourced. You've got all of your services, like Salesforce and ADP, those kinds of things. That's where it's going. Your applications are in there somewhere, right? The transition to make this work is quite simply to take worst case example that door is open, and that door is always going to be open, at least for the next couple of hours here. Whoever comes through there is not authenticated until Sean hits their ID card, right? That's what this is. At that point, they can come in and participate. So you have to look at a participation model is what this really means. Are they able to participate, yes or no? And that is a data, application, network, and identity thing. Those 4 legs of that stool make that work. Okay. And I stole these because these are real. I didn't have to make those up. That's cut, paste, put on, right? Okay, here we go. Bill, I really like the idea of putting a roadmap together, but where do I start? I have no idea what I'm doing, right? Never done one before. My boss and my boss's boss are always like, let's think about what 2023 is going to be. Where am I going to spend my money? What do I got to do? How am I going to get there? What are you not going to get done? What are you going to get done, right? So this is what you've got to do. You've got to look at what you already have, because you can't look forward without looking at the current state. You just can't do it. What is it, not only from an identity posture, but for the entire security posture? If you're the CISO, or you work for the CISO, or you get to the CISO, what is it we're doing with the entire security posture? That includes email, SIM, MDM, the whole 9 yards. You got to make sure that you know what you connect to, right? You can't do identity proofing without a SIM, as an example. Now you're going to align what you believe is the identity roadmap and the posture to that, right? Then we go back to the 4 pillars and do the tabletop review. Connective tissue, source of truth, use cases, data model. That will be painful because you're going to have to wring your hands and argue amongst yourself about what really is and isn't important. And you still have to find a third form normal index to make this whole thing work. Identity is always based on that. You've got to have a GUID. Doesn't matter what it is. I don't care if it's email address, employee ID, user ID, just pick one. But you're going to live with that. So that decision has to last a generation, not just one time. That's a generational decision. This one will be controversial and interesting. Every single company that has a booth there and the ones that aren't here have a roadmap. How many of you have actually looked at the licensed products that you have in inventory and seen the roadmap of where they're headed? So I got 1.5 and another half. So I got 2 people out of 3. All right, so that's the point. It's like, where are they going, and how am I supposed to know what that even means to me? And if they're headed in the wrong direction, if they're going south and I need to go north, is that still the right investment for what we're trying to do? The answer is maybe. The answer could be no. But you should never let a multi-year licensing deal get in the way of that. If I need to drive on the right-hand side of the road because I'm in Europe and I've got a left-handed car, either you're going to figure out how to make that work or you're going to have to get a different car. Right? This is hyper important. I can't stress enough that the investment in time that you spend right here, and that's what we spend a lot of time right here, understanding where things are going. If you don't understand what they're going to come up with, and oh, by the way, it just shows up in a press release, it's like, you just did yourself a disservice and the company and everybody else. Because if this is not in lockstep with this and this, then none of this works going forward, right? So talk to your sales executive for whoever you've licensed your products. Ask them to get the product team, not the sales engineer. I'll say this again. The product team and not the sales engineer to give you a roadmap conversation. And you can be as aggressive or assertive, whichever term you prefer, about what they're doing and why they're doing it. Ask hard questions. Because if their roadmap can't answer those, or the product team can't answer those, then those are issues you've got up here. Okay? Hopefully you can see now how all of this connective tissue comes together strategically. Because if you can put all of this together, the business will fund it. Because you've now defended everything that you've said you can do, and it fits into the entire CISO organization. Especially if you're either in a public or a regulated environment, these things are absolutely hypercritical. And when the audit team tries to come in here and do a dance on you, just give them the middle finger and go away. Bye, you're done. We're done. All right. This one here, you have to put in your plan. What is it that I can't do even though I know I need to do it? I've got to figure it out, but I can't do it right now. It's a gap. I've talked to everything that I've purchased or I've licensed. They can't fix it. So we go back then to the previous slides 2 ago, where it talks about all the tactical things. Those go into the tactical buckets. I can't get there from here. All right, and then you build the map. You need a transition, you need a baseline, you're going to implement it, you're going to execute it, and then you're going to do it again. This is not a one-time shot. I cannot stress to you enough, this is not a one-time shot. If you make it a one-time shot, then it's going to be broken in 18 months because of the velocity of what I showed you in 2 slides. Number one, the 14 points, and the other one is the 40 plus, which is really more like 140 points. I should check my time. Oh, we're good. Okay, all right. So this is super critical here. I want to make sure this makes sense. I want to make sure that if you've got any questions here, this is the time and place for that. I've tried to make this very practical and pragmatic and very understandable because I've tried to make this a primer. Yes, ma'am.
Will the security posture differ from the identity posture?
Yes.
In what ways?
The identity posture is only part of the entire security posture. So I'll give you one simple example. So the security posture would have the SIM in it. We are a consumer of that sim. So we have to make sure that that sim will support the things that we want it to do and we need it to do if you're going to, say, do zero trust. Or if you're going to make a CASB policy decision, right? Those are the type of things where the connective tissue. Does that make sense? Yeah, good, cool. All right. This is a wonderful exercise, by the way. Even if you just said, you know what, I'm going to get the bar and I'm going to have a couple of beers, I'm just going to take a blank piece of paper and I'm going to see what I can do. Boom. And you'll be fascinated to go look at it and go, holy crap. I'm 80-20, I'm 30-70. I was like, yeah, I got some work to do. Okay. All right. Okay, so remember the first slide we talked about? We had a road, but the car wasn't on it. We've got a car with a full tank of gas, car's on, ignition's on, and we're gonna go as fast as you want to. You'll notice that I've put year 2 here. This might take a lot longer, it might take a lot shorter. It really is gonna depend on your environment and how many people you need to bring to the table that don't believe, right? If there's politics that have to be played, that's gonna be a prerequisite on the call to action, right? But basically, you execute the call to action, you implement phase 1, 2, and 3, and then you look at it for next year, okay? So, this is the visionary point and the visionary moment. So Nick is going to give the next masterclass, and he's going to talk about this, the lessons of actually putting in an investment that a company made, and we're told that it wouldn't work, and we decided that that wasn't the right answer. And so that was the future-proofing of being able to say, no, there is a different way, and we know we can leverage the investment and be able to implement that. So this will be specifically about the 4 or 5 ping products and putting that in the cloud. Okay. Just a little teaser here. I tried to put an identity question mark in here, so you can see that. Right. Yes, ma'am.
So earlier on, you mentioned 4 basic pillars, the data model, source of truth, use cases, and connective tissue. So in a scenario where you have an IAM stack for your customers,
Yep.
an IAM stack for your enterprise, and you have another IAM stack potentially for your production environment,
Mm-hmm.
where can I learn more about the differing data models between those environments? Because chances are you're going to have different identity management systems in each of these spaces.
100% right.
And the data model is probably going to have to be slightly different as well. However, if you're trying to do the connective tissue thing where you're going to very granular role-based access across the enterprise, you kind of need to know how to gel together those different data models.
So I'll go back to this slide just so we go there. Yeah, no problem. Yeah. So remember I said there were 5 of them, right? There is workforce, customer identity, vendors, consultants, third-party vendors, and IoT, right? Everybody has at least one of those, and some of them have all 5. The data model for SIAM will not be the same as the data model for workforce. Never will be, and it shouldn't be, right? And maybe I should have said data models here. My bad. But for the contractors and for the workforce, a lot of the attributes are the same, right? Probably 90% of them. Because it's really a staff augmentation. You're bringing arms and legs to do a job that we don't have a full-time person for, so we're going to bring them in. And so they're, in essence, it's the only difference is how they're getting paid, not the work they're doing, right? Unless you know that they're a contractor, you know, I worked at the place for 10 years, and nobody ever knew that I wasn't an employee of IBM, so, right? So that's just kind of how that works. So the connective tissue would literally be amongst what you're talking about and connecting what that needs to be. You would never connect the SIAM and the workforce. I have never seen that work effectively. I mean, there's a reason that Okta bought Auth0, right? So, does that help? Yeah, good. Yeah, you're welcome. Good. Anything else, folks? So with that, thank you for your time. I appreciate it. If you got any other questions, let me know.